Hello, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Monday the 6th of December, and this is Scotland at 7. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this evening I'm hosting the programme from Edinburgh. First, we will have today's coronavirus update, then I will introduce this evening's guest, and then we will look at today's news headlines from Scotland and around the world together. As of 2 p.m. today, since the start of the pandemic, a total of 3,716,314 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 2,972,818 have been confirmed negative, and 743,496 have tested positive. There are 3,894 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, but remember, not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 591 were in hospital last night, 43 of whom were in intensive care. There are no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive, and that means that the number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 9,649. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. The latest UK daily figures show that 145,646 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, and that is an increase of 41 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 4,354,064 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, 3,960,681 had received their second dose, and 1,889,285 have received a third dose or their booster. Now, with regard to many of those coronavirus statistics this evening, bear in mind that this is a Monday, so we're still catching up from the weekend, and we also know that there was a delay in the provision of some data over the weekend from the UK government testing labs. So I expect those numbers to change during this week and then begin to be more in line with our expectations. Now then, this evening we're lucky enough to be joined by a long-term friend and regular contributor to the programme, Chris McCusker. Chris, as you know, is a member of the SNP's trade union group. He's a campaigner and a carer, and of course he's also Newton Mearn's answer to Paul Hollywood. Chris, how are you this evening?
I'm absolutely tickety-boo, Andrew. Glad to be back on the show. It's been a couple of weeks. You left out the fact that I'm also a humanitarian aid worker, so I'll overlook that one.
Thank you for adding that. It's great to see you this evening, Chris. Thank you. Our first story this evening is that the SNP has warned that Boris Johnson's government is mirroring the behaviour of tin pot dictators, with their plans to throw out legal rulings they don't like and the intent to overhaul the Human Rights Act, as well as the bid to push through the voter ID bill. Reports reveal that the UK government is looking to bring in an interpretation bill. That would strike out any judicial review outcomes with which the government does not agree. The plan comes after a series of clashes with judges, including the Prime Minister's decision to prorogue Parliament, which was found to be unlawful by the courts. This is on top of the judicial review bill that the Tories are pushing through Parliament, which seeks to remove vital checks and balances on the UK government in its tracks. The Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, has also made clear that he wants to tear up the current Human Rights Act, and the UK government's elections bill, dubbed the Trumpian Voter ID Bill, is due its third reading. If passed, that bill would undermine democracy by giving the UK government control over who can and cannot participate in election campaigns, give power to Michael Gove over the Electoral Commission, and shut out marginalised communities from participating in elections. Edward Garnier, who was Solicitor General under David Cameron, has said that Number 10 should have learnt the lesson of the prorogation battle when the Supreme Court reminded the government that this is a country under the rule of law and not under a dictatorship. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow Justice Secretary Anne McLaughlin MP said, "I do not use the term lightly, and I'm sorry I'm having to, but Boris Johnson is mirroring the actions of tin pot dictators. It is clear that the rights of the people of Scotland and our democracy can now only be protected through independence. If the UK government wishes in any way to uphold democracy and the rule of law, it is vital that it stops both the Judicial Review Bill and the Elections Bill in their tracks, as well as any plan that would see the Human Rights Act ripped up or overhauled." So, Chris, firstly, the powers of the UK Prime Minister have been described in the past as being the powers of an elected king. So, do you think is it any surprise that we're now seeing the elected king at the moment starting to take these steps in order to try and limit the abilities of the courts and to put his government above the law?
No, not really. I was trying to remember the character in Shrek 3, I think it was. Who just basically done everything to suit himself. I can't remember who it was. But yeah, I mean, what it is the fact that by hook or by crook, there's no pun intended there when I use the word crook, is the fact that the Johnson government will do anything and everything in order to stay in power. We have seen that time and time again, their carte blanche attitude towards the general public, with their golden rule of don't do what I say, do or don't do as I do as I say. That relates obviously to the party that they had on the 18th of December last year, and they're scant regard for following any rule of law, as again being well documented with the proroguing of Parliament. So no, I mean, I have to agree with yourself and Anne, of course, obviously. I mean, Scotland needs to get out of this union, and it needs to be, in the timescale that Nicola Sturgeon has set out.
Thanks, Chris. And it just crossed my mind that when we're seeing former Tory solicitors general criticising what is now being done by Boris Johnson's government, is that an indicator to us of just how far this current Tory government has drifted away from the more usual conservatism that you might expect to see from them? And I should say the Conservative Party in England, how far it has drifted to the right and into authoritarianism.
Well, I mean, Scotland has witnessed, the writing on the wall since 2014, the lengths that the establishment, will go to. And I made sure that I said the establishment, not just the Tory party, because in the latest machinations of Westminster, we have a petition which is actually looking into this infamous party on the 18th, and we now have the Commissioner of the Met Police, Chris Dick, basically saying that they will look into the matter, but that's as far as it's going to go. And that was confirmed, obviously, again by Dominic Raab, famously on Sunday on the Andrew Marr show. Where it seems to me that if you rob a bank in 2019, that there's no point in running off to Acapulco anytime soon, because the Met Police won't look at the crime retrospectively. Make no mistake, as I said, the tradition of the Conservative government at this moment in time is in order to preserve power. Unfortunately, Labour don't look like the animal that could inflict any kind of wound upon the Conservative Party. And even if Labour were capable of doing that, it's not going to change anything on Scotland's horizon anytime soon. And the far often we've always complained about Westminster and all the rest of it. To my mind, we need to be complaining about the establishment, because it's the establishment that are keeping are keeping us in this unholy alliance.
Thanks, Chris. We'll move on to our next story now, and that is that from today, the COVID certification scheme in Scotland includes provision for a negative test for COVID-19 as an alternative to the proof of vaccination. The Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, said COVID certification is playing a positive role in reducing the risk of transmission of COVID-19. It is also allowing higher risk settings to continue to operate more safely. This change makes it possible for people to show proof of a negative test as an alternative to proof of vaccination. In addition, as we approach the festive season and people socialise indoors, we are asking for everyone to significantly step up and increase compliance with public health measures. This includes using lateral flow testing more regularly, as well as getting vaccinated, wearing face coverings, and working from home where possible. I have been heartened, he said, to see that there has been a significant increase in demand for tests recently, and would encourage all households to have and use a regular supply of the tests. So, Chris, I think this is an interesting change. I think we had all agreed that the introduction of the vaccine passports was at least in part to encourage younger people to get their vaccinations, and in order that they could then go out and party at Christmas time, as you would expect. So this change now moving away a little bit from proof of vaccination and simply producing not simply, but only producing evidence of a negative lateral flow test. Why do you think this change is being made just now?
For me, it's a strange one. I think that they are wanting to open up society as wide as possible. So they're looking at the different permutations of the fact that certain people are just hard set fast anti-vaccinators, and you could actually be an anti-vaccinator and not have the coronavirus. You could also be in that group of society who, for several medical reasons, cannot be tested, and obviously, can't receive a jab as well. So, I think it's trying to show a more inclusive approach. At the same time, not obviously trying to harm business and stuff like that. So I think it is stretching the net in sort of like terms of equality, I think. And, whether it works or not, time will tell. But, we will know soon enough, because it's, we're fast approaching winter, if not, we're already in it. And the flu cases and cold cases that normally come around at this time of year are only going to exacerbate the NHS at this moment in time. So I think they're trying to be proactive in order to try and sort of like keep the numbers at the very minimum.
Thanks, Chris. And it crossed my mind that some other broadcasters, not Broadcasting Scotland, but others, much of their COVID coverage over the last few weeks and months has been platforming increasingly irate and ill-qualified publicans and nightclub owners to criticise government policy in the middle of a pandemic. So I wonder, do you think this change, this broadening of the means by which people can get into licensed premises, do you think this is an attempt to either draw the heat out of the situation with the licensed trade, or to put the licensed trade's criticism offside, because the government can now say that they've taken proportionate steps to address concerns?
Yeah, I think the latter of your assumption there would be correct, because I don't think it's in the best interest of the Scottish Government in order to marginalise the licensed trade, given as to what the licensed trade means to Scotland. We're not just talking nightclubs here, we're talking restaurants, bars, we're talking about licensed premises within the tourist trade, uh, all the rest of it. Yes, there have been some vociferous voices, mainly coming out of Glasgow and Edinburgh, and they will, they will. I, I would like to say that they will welcome the announcement. I don't know if they will welcome it. They will happily work with it in order, if it means getting back to any sort of like near sense of normality. But it won't stop them whinging. It certainly won't stop them treading the beaten path to the other news outlets that we could mention, but let's not say we did, that perpetuate the UK government narrative of the fact that everything's bad and the Scottish government are doing absolutely hee-haw in order to countermand the situation that we're in.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Chris. Now, our next story is that as power is finally fully restored to all those who experienced outages as a result of Storm Arwen, the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, has thanked everyone involved in the recovery effort and has committed the Scottish Government to take forward a lessons learned exercise. Mr Swinney said that Storm Arwen had been a more significant event than the Beast from the East in 2018, requiring a complexity of response that Scotland has not seen for a number of years. It was almost unprecedented in its severity, and he expressed his sympathies to everybody who has been impacted. The Deputy First Minister said, throughout the course of the recovery effort, the Scottish Government Resilience Committee met on several occasions, and there have been extensive discussions daily, several times a day, with the power companies. While engineers have been working round the clock to get everyone back on supply, we have supported local resilience partnerships to help provide advice and welfare support to those affected. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all those who have been working in very difficult conditions and for prolonged periods to restore utility supplies and to support affected communities and households. He said that this included voluntary organisations, local businesses and community groups of volunteers, some of whom he had the pleasure of meeting last week when he visited the village of Monymusk in Aberdeenshire. Now, Chris, as a broader point, first of all, as climate change brings more extreme weather and more regular extreme weather, is it time for the Scottish Government, do you think, to really push forward in its resilience preparations and to beef up its responses to what we might predict are going to be more regular events?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, these are going to be more uh, uh, a regular occurrence every winter, and it's as well to be forewarned as forearmed in these situations. I would actually watch the debate in Westminster today, some of it, with regards Storm Arwen, and I was really quite surprised to. Well, actually, I wasn't that surprised, but to hear a certain Scots Tory MP pontificating about the help and resilience of the British Army, when it comes to helping out in Scotland, which I found, gave me a silent chuckle, bearing in mind the fact that Scottish taxpayers actually pay for the British Army as well. So, it's as well as they did actually come and help us, but that's neither here nor there. The other side of the argument that was being made was the communication network, and there was one such network that sort of like struck a chord with me, is the fact that several networks were not allowing you to report on the national sort of like helpline. And certain networks were allowing you to do so. Certain networks were charging, and certain networks weren't. So there seems to be, something that needs tied up there. And it's also interesting as well, in that debate, I also found out that during Storm Arwen, the first 5 days, Boris Johnson failed to hold a Cobra meeting in light of the help that was needed, not just in Scotland, also the northeast of England also got it, the old, shall we say, red wall. And some of the Tory MPs that have been newly elected to that area of constituencies were being quite, they were making their case quite forcibly that they feel that, the help wasn't there and it wasn't as joined up as what it, could have been. So, I'm heartened to hear the fact that the Scottish Government have had regular resilience meetings in order to try and alleviate the pressures that the remote communities have been under. So, going forward, if we can do more work so that we're more prepared in the future, because let's face it, climate change isn't going to end just by, turning your kettle off or something like that, or turning your heating down. It needs more radical, it needs more radical tactics in order for that to happen.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Now then, our next story is that workers at several Tesco distribution centres across the UK are set to strike in the run-up to Christmas, potentially hitting product availability, the Unite union said today. The union said that warehouse and truck drivers based at depots in Belfast and Antrim in Northern Ireland, Didcot in Southern England, and Doncaster in Northern England were taking strike action in protest over the supermarket group's offer of a 4% pay rise. The Belfast and Antrim workers will be taking all-out strike action from December 16th. Didcot and Doncaster workers will strike for 48 hours from the same day and for 5 days from the 20th of December. Tesco, which is the UK's biggest retailer, said it had made a fair pay offer. UK retailers are already grappling with Brexit delays in international supply chains that are being compounded by labour shortages in domestic transport and warehousing networks, with a lack of heavy goods vehicle drivers particularly acute. So, Chris, we'll maybe look at this story from two directions. Firstly, Tesco reported profits up by more than 16% last year. So why do you think that they made a pay offer to their staff, which in all likelihood will mean that their wages are static after the predicted inflation next year?
Well, basically, what Tesco are trying to do, to my mind, is to try and recoup the losses that they incurred during the pandemic. And this derisory offer to the drivers within their network, 4% is really a slap in the face. We've had it from government departments that a base rate of 8% onwards would be a starting point. At least that's what was mooted by my own union, the USDA, which is the Union of Shop Workers and Allied Distributors. The base rate of 8% and escalating through time was one which was actually offered to the offer that the government made to the Polish drivers, the drivers from Lithuania, and further beyond in Europe, and only I think they put out some sort of consultation. I think they were looking for something in the region of 5,000 drivers, 10,000 drivers, and only 200 people replied. And that was based on 8%. With Tesco slapping their drivers in the face with 4%, it was always going to result in that, and I've got full solidarity for them.
Absolutely, Chris. And we'll look at this from the other perspective as well. Do you think that, given that, as I just said, HGV drivers are in short supply, their skills are still in high demand because we're still in the pandemic and people are still shopping online more. So, do you think is this simply? And also, I should say, it was interesting that the two of the depots here are in Northern Ireland, where, of course, transport and transportation and logistics has been a point of contention during Brexit. Do you think, is this simply the case of the HGV drivers flexing their industrial muscle when their skills are in high demand?
Well, no, it's not actually. Excuse me. It's not actually the fact that they're flexing the muscle. I mean, you could look at it that way and say, well, every time we come into Christmas, the French air traffic controllers always down tools and they go on strike, and then they enter pay negotiations and pay bargaining and all the rest of it. But the upshot is that the terms and conditions for your average haulier within Britain is absolutely woeful. It is absolutely shocking. There is bare scant regard to health and safety. Quite a lot of the actual independent hauliers have to be their own health and safety officers. There's absolutely no facilities for them within Britain in any such way, shape, or form. If you look at a company that trades in the FTSE 100, they've all got nice plush lounges that they can access. They can all go into the restroom and have a shower and manicure themselves and have a shave. You don't get that on the M8 and the M25 or the M40. The services in Britain compared to the services in Europe are absolutely way below standard and are very, very underfunded.
Well, nobody would disagree that it's a tough job, and people that work in the haulage industry work extremely hard in difficult circumstances, not least as we come into winter. So your point's well made. Thanks, Chris. We'll move on to our next story now, and that is that exhausted oil and gas wells could be turned into deep test sites for burying carbon dioxide next year, under plans from a consortium of universities and energy companies. There are hundreds of active onshore oil and gas wells in the UK, but as they come to the end of their lives, some need to be redeployed for trials of pumping CO2 underground and monitoring it to ensure it does not escape, the group says. The test wells could also be used to assess how hydrogen can be stored underground. CO2 capture and storage will be a significant part of tackling the climate crisis, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the UK's official advisors, the Climate Change Committee. The reservoirs under the North Sea provide the biggest potential storage for CO2 from fossil fuel burning, but the consortium said that reusing existing onshore wells was the fastest and cheapest way to research and develop safe and effective systems. The Net Zero Rise Research Infrastructure for Subsurface Energy project involves the universities of Newcastle, Oxford and Durham, and the fossil fuel companies iGas and Third Energy. It has identified 20 candidate wells, mainly in Yorkshire and the Midlands. A carbon capture scheme test site would bury a relatively small amount of CO2, about 1,000 tonnes, at between 1 and 3 kilometres depth. The cost of repurposing a well, plus 2 monitoring wells and the monitoring equipment, would be about £5 million, the group said. Similar test sites already exist in the US, Canada and Australia, but the consortium said that UK facilities would be better as they could have very similar geology to that under the North Sea. The British Geological Survey is also examining the case for an underground CO2 storage research laboratory. Hydrogen is seen as part of the move to a low-carbon economy, and being able to store it underground would help ensure a secure energy supply. It is a tiny molecule, and large rock salt formations are likely to be best at trapping the gas, but the UK has few such deposits. So, Chris, first of all, from a perspective north of the border, are you surprised at all that none of these candidate wells are in Scotland?
Absolutely not surprised whatsoever. I'm actually very surprised at how little it's actually going to cost. When you said 5 million, that's roughly about what they spend on the annual Tory conference, and not to mention the after show parties there. So I mean, for a small investment, it sounds like quite a huge return. Especially in R&D. towards the carbon capture. So Scotland needs to, to my mind, I think Scotland needs to be a wee bit more sneaky in our research and development, and not tell Westminster half of what we are telling them. Because it's quite clear that we are way down in the pecking order. It's been shown before when the site up was it in Forres or somewhere just outside
Peterhead.
Aberdeen. Peterhead, yeah. That was looked over in favour of a site in the northeast in order to placate those voters in the red wall, and that was done out of sheer bloody mindedness and damn politics. So I think we should go sneaky. We should. I mean, they are doing hydrogen capture up at the Scotland's biggest wind farm, Whiteleys and Eaglesham, just about 3 miles from where I'm sitting just now. And they've. I think they're starting that next year. I think they're preparing the ground for it just now, and it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. But again, as I say, we first of all we need to get out of this fecking union. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just not working. And that's a long shot, and be all and end all of it. Then Scotland can decide exactly what is right for us, And I believe that an independent Scotland will be fully consultative of the electorate in any big, major, radical changes and reforms. Whether it's down to carbon capture or whether it's down to, drawing on fossil fuels and stuff like that for the future. That'll all be, because I mean, it's so chalk and cheese at this moment in time. The transparency within Scotland, although certain people in Scotland won't actually see it because they don't engage, with the Scottish government. But the Scottish government are far more transparent than the Westminster government will ever try to be or allude to be or set out to be. They really don't care, about what's happening up here, and it's high time that Scotland starts not caring about what happens down there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Now then, French prosecutors have opened an investigation into violence that erupted at the first major campaign rally held by the far-right French presidential candidate, Eric Zemmour. Shortly after Zemmour began speaking on Sunday evening, some of his supporters attacked a group of protesters from the campaign group SOS Racism, who had entered the rear of the venue wearing T-shirts reading "No to Racism." The prosecutor's office said police detained about 60 people after the brawl at a meeting hall in Villepinte in a northeastern suburb of Paris. One man was filmed repeatedly punching a female protester, and another woman was led out with blood running down her face. 5 protesters were injured in total. As well as the violence targeting SOS Racism campaigners, the prosecutor's office said it was also investigating a fracas that involved Zemmour himself. Video images showed a man surging out of the crowd with arms outstretched as the candidate walked through throngs at the rally. The man appeared to briefly lock arms around Zemmour's neck before he was pulled away. So, Chris, in the context of right-wing political rallies, this rings all sorts of bells. But the leader of SOS Racism was quoted this morning as saying, "You either have to be drunk with racism or be certain of your omnipotence to be able to act like that in front of the cameras." Now, firstly, Being drunk with racism and certain of your omnipotence just reminds me of Priti Patel, but we'll put that to one side for a moment. The outbreak of violence, both towards protesters and apparently the candidate himself being involved in a headlock or an embrace with somebody as well. Does it sound like the political temperature is being turned right up in the next French presidential campaign?
Yeah, and I believe tenfold. And I'm glad that you made that analogy about Priti Patel and not me. So, well, I think the viewers are well versed in what I think about Priti Patel anyway. Yeah, so look, yeah, I've been worrying about the rise of right-wing racism within Europe for a number of years, and I had thought that it was slightly on the wane. My various follies into Calais and Dunkirk and even Belgium and stuff like that. I've seen the far right, their attitudes, and it's not nice. It really isn't right. It actually reminds you of something like Britain in the 70s. That kind of section of the community that put their flags behind Enoch Powell. It really is quite ugly and stuff like that. And Macron, to my mind, he needs to nip this in the bud, and he needs to nip it, quickly. But unfortunately, the likes of people like Marianne Le Pen, and they are always hovering in the background and just waiting for the right time in order to rear their ugly head. I mean, she's France's answer to Nigel Farage. That one. It's honestly, it's if you're not basically chewing on a baguette and drinking red wine, then you're not French, and therefore you should get out of the country. That is a narrative that the line that she goes down. But the way that I said about
I was just going to say I'll keep that image in my head of the of the consuming baguettes and red wine. That's a perfect picture. But what we'll do is we'll move on to the next story if we can, and that is that a military court in Myanmar has found Aung San Suu Kyi guilty of incitement and breaking COVID restrictions, drawing condemnation from the United Nations, European Union, and others who described the verdicts as politically motivated. The 76-year-old, who was deposed in a coup in February, is set to serve 2 years in detention at an undisclosed location, a sentence reduced from 4 years after a partial pardon from the country's military chief, state TV reported. The court in the capital was delivering its first verdicts in numerous cases brought against Aung San Suu Kyi that have previously been described by her lawyer as absurd. The conviction of the state councillor following a sham trial in secretive proceedings before a military-controlled court is nothing but politically motivated, the United Nations Human Rights Chief, Michelle Bachelet, said. The EU's top diplomat also condemned the verdict as politically motivated and called for the immediate release of all political prisoners in Myanmar. Little is known about the proceedings in any of the legal cases, and Aung San Suu Kyi has been tried in a closed court with no access to observers, and her lawyer has been prevented from speaking to journalists. She has been held at an unknown location since February. The incitement case reportedly centred on a statement published online following the February coup, which had urged international organisations not to cooperate with the junta. The second case alleged that she had broken COVID rules while campaigning before last year's election. The former president, Win Myint, was sentenced to 4 years on the same charges, and the former mayor of the capital was sentenced to 2 years for incitement. Now, Chris, as we were saying, she's been slapped with an array of charges, several counts of corruption, violating the Official Secrets Act, violating COVID restrictions for campaigning during the election. She had waved to supporters wearing a mask and a face shield, and inciting unrest for a statement calling for public opposition to the coup. And that was put out by her party after she was already in custody. And also, we've seen her lawyers being served with gagging orders, preventing them from releasing information. So, does this indicate that the current military leadership in Myanmar are determined to return Aung San Suu Kyi to prison for as long as they possibly can, and to silence her and silence dissent in the country?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Not to be flippant, but I dearly wish that the UN would do, something similar to Boris Johnson, with the amount of times that he's broke the rules and broke COVID protocol and all the rest of it. But that wasn't a gag, that wasn't a snide comment in any such way, shape, or form. It was, as I say, very, very flippant. And I'm not trying to belittle the people of Myanmar when I say that, but if these sanctions are being taken against one person, why is it not level across the board to a person of equal standing? I mean, despots around the world. They don't suffer fools gladly. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Let's move on to our next story, and that because I know that you and I will want to discuss it, and that's because a national campaign highlighting the damage caused by the stigma of problem drug and alcohol use is being launched today. Television and newspaper adverts and posters on billboards will emphasise that a drug or alcohol problem is a health condition, and judging individuals affected can have a devastating effect on their ability to seek and access help and support. A web page on NHS Inform will support the campaign with further information on how the public can help tackle the problem. Scotland's Drugs Policy Minister, Angela Constance, said this is a hard-hitting national campaign which encourages people to see the personal story behind the stereotype. Stigma is damaging not only to the individual in terms of their mental health and sense of self-worth, but it also discourages them from coming forward to get the help they need. It also impacts on families and friends. And so, Chris, it struck me, and I know you'll have a view on this for a couple of reasons, but it struck me that there was something similar in this approach to the louder and louder requests that we're hearing at the moment, that in terms of the politics of refugees and asylum seekers, that these are human beings and they deserve and ought to be shown compassion and help and given help rather than being condemned and stereotyped. So thinking, however, about this context in particular, this is with regard to drugs and alcohol addiction, do you think that this is an indication that the Scottish Government has a very different approach to Westminster and an approach that might have a much better chance of success?
Yeah, I have to totally 100% agree with you there. And this is actually, I welcome this from the Scottish Government. It's long overdue. They could have easily have introduced this, excuse me, when Joe Fitzpatrick was the drugs minister. And I've been calling for a long time now for a radical new look at how we treat drug and alcohol addiction in Scotland. Myself being the son of an alcoholic, I know only too well what alcohol does in a family setting, and I don't mind telling the viewers that from a personal point of view, I have been there. Thankfully, I made the choice between the bottle and politics. Funnily enough, actually, an awful lot of people will find that it was actually one of my friends who's not politically engaged in any such way, shape, or form. He actually said to me that he couldn't believe that politics would have been my saviour. And had I not got reinvigorated with politics, I could have easily have ended up at the bottom of a bottle. So it is way overdue. It's way over time. And yes, you are right, 100%, Andrew. I can't agree with you anymore. Is the fact that, like refugees, like migrants, drug addicts and alcoholics are human people as well, and there is very often, nine cases out of 10, there is always an underlying story as to why that person chose, to succumb to that addiction. And I think if Scotland can understand that and engage with that long before the intervention of the police and uh, you, you know, the society that actually rejects people who are suffering because of these addictions, then we might actually start be able to see the figures drop in Scotland with regards drug abuse and alcohol abuse.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Now, we'll move on to our next story, and that's that more than £13 million has been awarded to local authorities to increase the quantity and quality of recycling in Scotland. 9 more local authorities have successfully bid for support from the Scottish Government's Recycling Improvement Fund, bringing the total investment to date to £20 million. The fund, which will total £70 million over 5 years, will deliver a step change in Scotland's recycling performance and help local authorities get ready for future developments, including Scotland's deposit return scheme. The investments to date could reduce CO2 emissions by as much as 21,400 tonnes each year, and that's the equivalent of taking more than 11,000 cars off the road. The Circular Economy Minister, Lorna Slater, said, "This is one of the biggest investments in recycling in Scotland in a generation. By providing the support that's needed to modernise local recycling infrastructure, we can help local authorities significantly improve their recycling performance." So firstly, Chris, in terms of politics, do you think is this announcement today, is this a sign that the Bute House agreement between the Scottish Government and the Scottish Greens is continuing to work?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And for the life of me, I can't think why the deposit and return scheme was ditched in the first place. It was hugely successful, obviously, by the purveyors of Scotland's national drink. And there are other varieties that were widely available that are not now, actually. When you think back on it, if you can remember Alpines and Soul Ripe and all the rest of it, you always had a sale and return on those ginger bottles. But I think again, this is something like the previous piece. The Scottish Government have got to apply some radical thinking towards packaging and all the rest of it. I mean, cast your mind back. I mean, it wasn't that long. The late '60s, early '70s. You had your milk delivered to you in bottles, and then you put the bottles out. They went back to the dairy. They get washed and sterilised and recycled and put back out again. Chances are that the bottle that you sent on the Monday, is the bottle that you were going to get on the Friday. And we need to get back into that way of thinking, because it's unsustainable to plastic usage in Scotland. Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation the other day there with a friend of mine, and so many things that that we used to do back in Glasgow, such as going to the grocers and ask for butter, and it would get palleted and patted in front of you and put on a bit of greaseproof paper, and out the door away you get. The same as when you went to the fish shop and stuff like that, it just got wrapped in paper, and that was you, cheerio. And and there was no packaging, or I mean, virtually no packaging. We have to think about, can we not return to some sort of, way that we used to do things, where it involved actually people working in front of you? It's like this argument with electric cars and stuff like that. I find it really boring, because your milk was delivered by an electric float. So, and it was capable of doing 45 mile an hour, for God's sake. So, these people that are spending £65,000 on a Tesla, in order just to get a big CD player and so, thing with a seat that warms your backside, for every 30 miles that you go. We need to get back to, basics, and applying the basics into today's modern society.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. I was going to ask you if you were looking forward to the return of the bottle deposit scheme, but you've already answered the question, so thank you. Our final story this evening is that the Met Office has issued 3 yellow warnings covering Scotland for Tuesday, the 7th of December. Strong winds and snow are forecast in some areas, which could impact on driving conditions and cause some disruption to travel and power. Transport Scotland, utility companies and local resilience partners have contingency plans in place in preparation for any disruption, and will continue to share up-to-date advice and information with the public. A ministerial meeting of the Scottish Government's Resilience Room, SGOR, chaired by Deputy First Minister John Swinney, was held earlier today to ensure that preparations and appropriate measures are already in place. So, Chris, we spoke earlier this evening about resilience in the context of Storm Arwen, and now we have Storm Barra that's scheduled to appear tomorrow. So, with regard to the power companies whose performance has been criticised after Storm Arwen, do you think the Scottish Government, as part of its preparations, do you think they should be pushing to raise standards and also raise penalties for power companies who seem to be struggling to maintain their infrastructure in the face of the weather that we now encounter in Scotland?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. If Storm Arwen has taught us anything, as I said earlier on, forewarned is forearmed, and with the evolution of weather forecasts and stuff like that being far more precise these days than what they were, say, the likes of 20 or 30 years ago, it is as well to, be proactive and take the action now. And that, must go obviously from the gritting of the roads right the way through to, electric companies, gas companies, all power companies, in order to keep the lights on for the most rural of the constituencies within Scotland. As we said earlier on in the programme as well, Andrew, is the fact that these occurrences are going to become the norm as we, go forward, due to the climate emergency. And I think they're going to be even more severe. I was out today, and okay, it wasn't snowing, but it really, really felt raw. You know what I mean? I've never been in Russia in the middle of winter. The closest I've been to that is Gdansk, and I kid you not, if you've been in Gdansk in December, you'll know all about it, for sure.
Fantastic, thanks, Chris. And that was our final item this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the financial support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. If you would like to support us financially, and we really need you to support us, then please consider subscribing or donating to Broadcasting Scotland, and you will find the link to do that on the screen now. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work and promotes the station, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. Meantime, we will be here again tomorrow evening with Scotland at 7, so please join us again then. I'd like to say very many thanks to Chris and to everyone who's joined us watching this evening. Thanks, Chris.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure once again, Andrew.
Thanks, Chris. So that's the way it is at very nearly Scotland at 8. Please keep warm and keep well. Bye-bye.